Okay, so, hey yo, my fellow remote maniacs. It's Mr. Roll Roses here, and welcome back to yet another installment of a little series I like to kind of refer to as Rants and Rambles, where I talk about stuff that's on my mind, and I usually try to do it all in one take, and um, I do it unscripted wise because, in my opinion, and this may be a hot take, but I feel like if you are talking if you're wanting to talk about things and you have a script of some sort, I feel like it's not genuine. Because to me, in my opinion, like if you don't somehow maybe repeat certain things and all that, then I feel like it's just overall not genuine. That's just my 2 cents. Anyway, so today I wanted to talk about something that's been kind of on my mind for the past I'd say for like the past while or so. And that is, quote unquote, the power role of ASYMs. Now, granted, I have not really played a whole lot of ASYM type games other than the game that you see before you, which is Dead by Daylight. Um, now, I have seen now while I haven't played a whole lot, I've seen a handful of ASYM type games, where it's like like multiplayer horde type games where it's like you have like like one side's doing this and then the other side's trying to like kill that that like and then like the other side's trying to kill the opposite end sides and shit like that and try and win. But I don't know, like I've been kind of thinking about this whole situation because there's one comment, or there's one little like comment thing that I've been seeing a whole lot of people go off on, and it's that the killer role is supposed to have, the power, like the killer role is supposed to be like having all the power role and everything like that, and so like a lot, and so like and so that kind of like and so that kind of like leads on to the fact that a lot of people are saying that Um, like Dead by Daylight is heavily survivor sided, and to me, like I'm sort of like at a crossroads with that. It's like I can see a lot of the examples and stuff given, but I also feel like I might have an understanding as to like why certain some things may be like this or that or whatever. So to me, and I said this before in the past, but the one thing I always found that there was the one thing I always thought was the main issue with people going off about this game is that people take things too logically, not too seriously, but too logically. It's like it's like people think people think that it's like, oh, survivors shouldn't have, like, it's like, like say for example, for like, because I know a handful of killers, have gone off on stuff like this, but it's like, there'd be like a lot of killer players would say like, oh, we're supposed to have we're supposed to be like the dominant power role. Survivors shouldn't have, like this, that, and the third in order to, counteract what I'm doing. Um, it's supposed to be like easy wins. It's supposed to be like getting 4Ks and all that stuff. And while people may say like, oh, we don't think that, but at the end of the day, I kind of feel like you may not say it out loud, but like the vast majority of people who play killer, I feel like that like whether they want to admit it or not, like that's something that I feel like a lot of people that's something I feel like a lot of people, would honestly, want to say. It's like, hey, we're supposed to be like, the big bad, you know, big bad killer. you know, and all that stuff. It's supposed to be like, you know, easy pickings, and survivors, you know, and like, you know, survivors just need to fucking get good or what have you. And you know, they're like, oh, you know, they shouldn't be able to use like, you know, like these, like these base kit. They shouldn't have like, you know, like these base kit features, and you know, you know, these quote unquote second chance perks and things like that. And I don't know about anyone else, but like it kind of just drives me up a wall. You know, just hearing people go off on the stupidest things. And you know, you may say that it's not stupid, but it is, honestly. Like it really is. Because and this is something I was kind of like, you know, trying like to ponder in my head. I've said before, like I haven't really played a whole lot of like ASYM games and stuff like that, but I've seen a lot of stuff, you know, from said games. And the one thing that always came to my mind was that some of those other games, as to the reason why, you know, like they pretty much like withered and died, was because there was too much of a power roll on one side or another. So, and yeah, and now I'm pretty sure, you know, people might, you know, like you know, listen to this, and you know, probably will debunk the shit out of it and all that. But I'm just saying, I'm not saying like, you know, I'm not stating like full functional facts. I'm just kind of just stating things of what I've seen and what I've kind of like put together in my head. So take it as you will, overall. But to me, it's like some of the games that some of the games that I seen was like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I think it was like VHS or something like that. Because I remember a couple friends of mine who used to play that game and everything, and you know they used to, you know, do like a lot of collabs on and everything like that. The one thing I remember, and like the one thing I remembered about that game, I believe, was um, the survivor players, you know, if you want to call them that, had the ability to basically fight back. Like apparently, I believe I believe like the whole shtick was, um, you know, you know, survivor type players were able to, you know, to go around, create weapons to, you know, try and kill the killer while, you know, the killer tries to, you know, stop them and stuff like that. And a lot of times that I've seen gameplay of that game, a lot of times it's like, oh, you know, there's a lot of times that I've seen game, you know, footage of that game. It always seems as though like the killer gets like kind of, it always seems like to me like the killer gets the short end of the stick, where it's like, you know, you think they're doing good, all of a sudden like, maybe like, you know, they'll get one person, but then like, you know, next thing you know, when they least expect it, another one person comes up and you know, kills them, and you know, and the rest of the survivors win or something like that. And I would almost say that I feel like that was the word. Now I would almost say like, you know, I feel like that was the reason as to why, as to like why, you know, the game, you know, withered off and died like it did. Now people can correct me if I'm wrong, you know, because I'm pretty sure I'm not really right, but I'm just saying, like I said, you know, like my 2 cents, what I think, you know, was, you know, with the reasoning. And I would almost say the same thing for Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but instead of survivors having the power role, I think it feels like it always seems like the killers or the family, you know, has, you know, like that role, where it's like, oh, you know, where it's like, oh, you know, you have to, you know, do all this and that just to fucking survive, and yet, you know, the family only has to do like very little and just basically just overall try and kill you. And a lot of times, a lot of times I've seen stuff with that, it's like, you know, it's always, you know, it seems like, you know, the family's able to, you know, get the upper hand on you. Especially like, you know, when you have, you know, like when you have like, say like, you know, like one survivor, type player, and you have two family members, who are the killers, and it's like, oh, and it's like, oh, they're going after, like the survivor, is trying to defend off, one person, and all of a sudden, the other family member, comes in and just like, double teams them, and pretty much just, straight up kills them and stuff like that. And I feel, and even though even though that there might be like that possibility of still have like Texas Chainsaw Massacre still kind of functioning, but not being as big as it once was per se. I kind of feel like the power roll situation where it's like too much. I feel like overall at the end of the day, it's kind of like a too much of a of a high power roll can lead to the downfall or the unsatisfaction of like the other side. Now, I'm gonna put this out, I'm just gonna just straight up put this out there and say that for me, I am mostly a survivor main. I play a lot of survivor more than killer, but that does not mean that I have never played killer in my life. Like I have played killer a lot of times in the past. Maybe it's a killer anxiety stuff, I don't know, but like I have played killer before. I've deathed every single killer in the game, from fucking Trapper at the very beginning all the way down to Jason. And so I have, so I feel like I have some kind of knowledge as to, what what something, what some people may feel. But I don't know, like I don't know what it is, but like I feel like if and this may be like the survivor side in me and everything like that coming out, but I feel like if the killer side of DVD had like the full power roll and everything like that, the a lot of killer a lot of killer mains beg and plead for, then it would pretty much would come down to it would pretty much come. I feel like it would pretty much come down to a fact that you know if you have so much of that, if the killer role has too much of this, then the survivors feel like they're not going to be able to really make much of a difference. Like, they feel like they're not going to be able to really win, and I feel like, and I kind of feel like at the end of the day, it's going to lead to like more, and like at the end of the day, I kind of feel like it's going to lead to like, like more people more people just, just straight up giving up, and and just being an overall boring experience. Now I know some people will probably take into the fact it's like, oh, I don't care about the other side's fun, and to me it's like to me it's kind of like, again, it's kind of like a crossroads where it's like, yeah, on the one hand you shouldn't really care about the other side's fun, but on the other hand though, like if you don't have if you don't have like X amount of people, then you would not have a game to play. Or if you if you go into a game with with the all the power and everything like that, and everything, then I feel like survivors would just give up a lot more, and it would make like your games like very boring. Yeah, like, I feel like it would make your games like very boring to the point where it's like, I feel like it would make your games, even more boring to the even more boring to the point where even you wouldn't want to play the killer right now. Where it's like, oh, every time I play, I get survivors who just straight up give up and not even bother taking this or doing that. Now, another thing that kind of comes to my mind as I'm, saying all that is, um, I know that some people are going to probably, point out the fact that, a lot that, I've like a handful of times where, they would play killer, that, they just have like survivors giving up and all that stuff, and I'm not saying like it doesn't, I'm not saying like it doesn't happen, but I feel like, but I feel like there's only like certain, random instances that it could happen, where it's like, you know, towards like, it's like, towards like, like the survivors have, like all this, that, and the third, and then like, you go up against, I don't know, like a fucking ghoul or the plague maybe Jason Voorhees himself, and then suddenly like, maybe like, they get hit once or they get downed once, and then just suddenly, just up and leave. Like I'm not saying, like I know that sometimes that can happen. Like I've been on the receiving end of like, most, I've been on like all of the receiving ends of, all that shit. Hell, I mean, and and as much as I don't like to say it, like I've had moments where it's like, I've kind of, I've DC'd before, like, but like I myself have DC'd before, but like, it's so rare, so like it's so rare to, to see me, DC, even if like, I'm not going, even if I'm not, like even if I'm not liking the killer that I'm going up against, like, for example, Legion, fucking Legion's, going around, putting everyone in deep wound, and you have to, quote unquote, stay injured, for the whole entire game, even though like I feel like, that would be very stupid and very boring, because then it's like, oh, they can just, one hit you and, go from there. Even with like the whole situation of, Legion going, into frenzy mode, and like, like marking all four survivors and everything like that, and then suddenly, like getting that one down. Which I said before, like in like videos and streams and all that, that Legion should not be able to put people in deep wound, because it makes no fucking sense. I would almost say in the exact same way that Legion should not have killer instinct like that. You know, but mostly, like, it boils down to, I feel like, Legion should never be allowed to have, I feel like Legion should never be able to have the ability to put people in deep wound. Because it makes no fucking sense. Like Deathlinger has more of a right to put people in deep wound compared to Legion. Say what you want about it, but that one I would say is more of the truth. I don't know, like, like people, like, cause like I said, people always talk about, and I'm trying to go back, to the, the main little thing, but, people always talk about like how, killers should have, be the more power role, dominant role, and all that stuff. But I feel like at the end of the day, if you do that, then it's going to make the game far worse. Where it's like, because, and I have seen like a lot of killer players saying like, hey, like survivors should not have like these base kit type features built in. Um, they should not be able to have perks that counter whatever I'm doing, like like Unbreakable, or like for the people, whatever, stuff like that. And they should just all, and they shouldn't be able to have like, like Dead Hard or Decisive Strike, and all that stuff. It's like, oh, we should have all the goods, and survivors should have nothing. And one of the things like I was remembering, because I wasn't around in the fog, when DVD, was in its early stages and everything like that. But I've seen a lot of videos and stuff like that where back then, um, like if you got saved off the hook, you didn't have like, you didn't have like any base kit endurance or whatever, and you could just basically just go down, just you got unhooked. And I feel like, and I feel like that would have been the time, and I feel like, if that was, would be if I feel like if that would have been still been implemented, then you wouldn't really have much of a game. You wouldn't really have many games, or probably even have that, or probably even have the game as a whole survive for that long. Hence why, to me, I would say, like, maybe, that's why, like, behavior, quote unquote, caters to survivors and everything like that. Um, but like at the same time though, um, I would say like, I don't know, like to me, like I would say like, like even though people like a handful of people would say, oh, this game is so survivor, like this game's so survivor sided and everything like that. But to me, I feel like that's not really. I feel like that's not 100% true. It may have some truth to it, but it's not like fully true. And the reason why I say that is because I feel like if it was too survivor sided, then no one who plays killer, no matter if you play like like a like the bottom of the barrel, tier list killer, or someone even high tier killer, would not be able to get a kill whatsoever. Cause I feel like that's the thing that some people kind of tend to forget. But that's just me. That's just my 2 cents. So yeah, like overall, like I feel like as much as killer players whine and complain and just overall just go off saying like, oh, we're supposed to have the power roll and everything like that. It's supposed to be in our favor and all that. But I feel like if that but I feel like again, if that was the case, then you would have either like boring games, or you would not have a game to where you could be able to queue into, because you would not have you would not have a full lobby of survivors. Because even if like because even if like you had like 3 survivors in the lobby, it takes 4 survivors. It takes like it literally takes like 4 survivors to to have to have a match. And yes, I know that it takes 1 killer to have to actually have a match as well. But I'm saying this more like on the survivor side of things. It's like survivors. I say like survivors make up the majority of the game, to the point where like some of them might play both sides, or maybe they might migrate towards one side more than the other and stuff like that. So yeah. But anyway, that's basically all I can really say about all that. That's about as much as I can think of putting into words, what have you. So yeah, that's all I got to really say about that. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video or live stream. But until then, as always, please take care of yourselves and have a good week or weekend.